Hello everyone. Hi Lem. Are you there?
Hi. Hi, hello.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. So yeah, I'm Alicito de Guzman, a part of Team PWA Pilipinas, and with me, oh sorry,
And hello,
mali
I'm
ako
Lem.
nakalagay.
Mm.
Okay. So before we begin, I guess let's include Seiji as well here.
Yep.
Yeah. Hi Seiji,
Hello. Nakamte.
as our
Yeah.
rep
Hi,
representative
Lem.
for
Hi,
Angular
Andre. Good evening.
Philippines.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you
so
for
before
having
we
me here.
Yeah. Okay. So before we begin, let's introduce our organizations first. So kami muna, and then after that we'll introduce Angular Philippines. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And so, welcome to Web Talks Angular Edition. Hopefully this is not the last one, and we do have many more to come. So, first we're going to introduce PWA Pilipinas. So, we are the community organization for progressive web apps enthusiasts, designers, and developers here in the Philippines. Our mission is to introduce and nurture progressive web apps development and adoption in the Philippines and beyond by fostering a community for subject matter experts, enthusiasts, developers, adapters of the platform, and by providing resources and engagement to stimulate interest in progressive web apps. Because our vision is that progressive web apps would be adopted widely here in the Philippines. And of course, if you wanted to stay in touch or wanted to know more about progressive web apps, we do have our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. We even have our own progressive web app that you can try out. Just visit app.pwpilipinas.org, which is this one. It's available as a progressive web app and it's also available on Google Play. And if you want to send us an email, you may do so by sending us one at hi@pwpilipinas.org. Okay. How about you, Seiji? Can you introduce
Yes.
Angular Philippines to us?
Yeah. Siguro, just a brief introduction of Angular PH. I will not show any slides. So, Angular PH is a community built from different tech leads in Philippines. So, mainly we are focusing on answering or helping other people in specifically in Angular framework. Not just Angular framework, but also JavaScript frameworks that can help us be a better developer. So if you want to join our group Angular PH, just search for our Facebook search bar Angular PH. Then uh, it will it will be the first result. So in our Facebook page. So if you want to learn more about Angular, then you're all free to join. And we have many mentors and especially speakers that can help you be better in Angular there.
Okay. So thank you, Seiji, for introducing
Yep.
Angular Philippines to us. So before we begin, we do have some shout outs here. So good evening to Mapi Sebastian. Hello.
I'm
Thanks
happy.
for watching. Thanks for watching. We also have Zaira Rabanillo. Good evening as well. And Mapi said Master Seiji.
training, training ko sila dati. So, yun.
Mm.
Kilala ko si Mapi.
And we also have one from Erwin, Mark Guillermo. Good evening, everyone. So,
Evening,
yun.
everyone.
And,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So I guess we can begin the first talk. So we're going to introduce our speaker first for our first talk. Okay. So where's that? Okay. So our first speaker graduated cum laude with a degree of Bachelor of Science in Computer Science at University of Santo Tomas. He's currently the technical lead for Frontier Software Asia Philippines, an in-house dev trainer for Rock Squad Design and Development, and one of the community leaders of Angular Philippines. Also, our speaker is one of the Auth Zero ambassadors here in the Philippines who is passionate on organizing tech meetups mentorships, writing tutorials in seijivillafranca.com, and have already been speaking and sharing tech stuffs in several events and conferences in the Philippines and abroad. I'm glad to welcome our first speaker for this talk, Seiji Villafranca. Hello.
Yeah, hi Andre. So yeah, thank you for introducing me as well as thank you for having me here in your event, Angular Web Talk. So it's really a pleasure for me to share my knowledge here in this event. So yeah, I think let's start for our talk. I will just share my screen.
Sure. So while CG is sharing his screen, if you have questions, you may leave them at the comment section of whether you're watching right now. So just leave a comment wherever you're watching. So yeah.
Yeah. Andre, is my screen okay now?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think let's start our first talk for today. So again, thank you for having me, Andre, for PIWA again. It's my second time to talk here, and it's really a pleasure for me to share my knowledge with the fellow developers. So my talk for today is tackling not just for Angular, but specifically for also Node.js. So this is a full stack development that I will teach you, specifically real-time apps. So we're gonna discuss about real-time apps with Angular, Node.js, and Socket.io. So before we proceed on developing the full stack application, we will discuss each what are their benefits, what are the advantages, what's the purpose of each elements that we will use in our development. So, okay, I've been introduced a while ago. So once again, I'm Seiji Villafranca. If you want to learn more about codes or other JavaScript tutorials like Angular, not just Angular and React, I also teach React. So you can visit my website, seijivillafranca.com. I have written several tutorials there pertaining to Angular, Node.js, React.js. So it's a full stack blog content. So you can freely browse my website if you want to learn more. Then you can also clone all my sample projects, github.com/cgv13. So all of my blogs are connected to this repository. So all my sample codes that are here found in my GitHub. So about me, once again, I'm the technical lead, Frontier Software Asia Philippines. I'm also a trainer in Rock Squad. Then I'm one of the community lead of Angular PH and one of the Auth0 ambassador here in the Philippines. So these are just some of my talks and events. So basically, Angular is my hometown, Angular PH community. So this is my first front end stack that I've learned since Angular 1. So I've been sharing for around 4 years in Angular development. So I've been from local talks into international talks like Angular Up. So it's really a great what these are one of the most greatest experience of my life because uh, I'm not just speaking for the developers, but I also learn from the top notch developers of Angular uh, locally and worldwide. So yeah, enough about myself. So let's proceed again on our topic. So first, we will discuss what we should learn in our topic for today. So what are the things that to be discussed? The first is what are real-time applications? What can real-time do with our apps? What can it help to our clients and users, and specifically for UI or UX design? So next is what is Socket.io? So how can it make real-time applications possible? Next is we will learn how to apply Socket.io with Node.js. So typically Node.js will be our main backend in our application. Then now we will apply the Socket.io in our front end, which is our JavaScript framework, is Angular. Then I will show you two examples how we are going to use Socket.io and Node.js and Angular. So the first one is a very basic example, and the other one is uh, pretty simple chat application that uses isolation of uh, emitting of events and listening of actions. So first, we will discuss what is Socket.io. So what the hell is Socket.io and what's the relation of Socket.io in creating real-time applications? So it's typically a JavaScript framework for creating real-time applications. So Socket.io is the central or the core that allows our real-time applications to be possible. So it's not if you are familiar with REST request, so it is not a REST or HTTP REST request, but it's rather a different architecture. So what really are real-time applications? So real-time applications are applications that are not one-way in data communication. So for a REST application, the front end communicates with our back end by sending data in one way without the server sending it back to the clients connected to the back end server. Real-time applications, on the other hand, allows bidirectional data, meaning that we are using push notifications in our applications. For example, a front end sends a particular command or execution on the backend server, and the backend server emits back to all the clients that are connected to the backend server. As I have said a while ago, in simple terms, it's called a push notifications. So, comparing to our two architectures, what I have mentioned a while ago, the REST API versus the Socket IO. So, REST API simply, we are discussing here that the client calls an HTTP request to the server to to send a specific or a particular command. For example, processing the data to update the database or create or insert another data in our database. But in order for us to get the data back again on our front end server or on our client browser, we should we should refresh our browser because this not contains push notifications. We will uh, it's not it's not a bidirectional communications for our uh, front end and back end application. On the other hand, Socket IO allows bidirectional data. So if the client send data via events or actions, this will allow the server to push again back all the updated data or any commands that need that other clients or front end applications that are connected to the server. So this is the main difference of REST API and Socket IO. So Socket IO in-depth architecture, we'll discuss this thoroughly. So if the client sends the data via events, so it is possible using the emit using under the IO library. So if this data is sent successfully to the server, so it will map it into a specific key message in our server, in our backend rather. So if the backend or the Node.js in our topic today is it will map all the data in the events rather in our backend, and it will execute a specific action that will go back to our client. So the action that will go back to our client is the push notifications. So how will Angular application listen to that push notifications? So we will allow Angular to have listeners in uh, our front end framework. So this is also possible by using npm library that is provided by Socket.io. So we will see this in action later on our example code on how to create listeners and how to create emitters in our backend and front end. So where can we use Socket.io? So the main question is here, why we really need real-time applications in our Angular app, in our Angular framework? So I've listed four of I think the main reasons why we need push notifications and applications. So first one is creating a chat application. So this is basically one of the common apps that we are using. So this is the most used applications nowadays. So chat application needs push notifications. Then next is real-time analytics. So having real-time data analytics makes a user interface or user experience easier and flexible. It will allow the users see all the data in real time and the updates rapidly. Then next is document collaboration. So for example, Google Docs, the Google Excel sheets. So this is an example of real-time applications as we are seeing all the changes that are being created by other users or other connected users real time or in live. Then the other one is specifically games. So games are live or real time. So if there are multiple users connected in our applications, so we really need push notifications here for our users. All our users see any updates or any moves from their opponents or uh, other players in the application. So now we have discussed what's the use of Socket IO and Node.js and Angular. So first is we will set up our Node.js or our backend. So in order for us to set up our Node.js, so for all the developers here that are familiar with Node.js, so we will just execute the command npm init -y. So basically, this will just generate the package.json that where we will see all the dependencies that we need for our project. Then the packages needed are uh, actually this is four, but uh, the main three that we will need for our Node.js to work with Socket.io is the Express. So Express is basically used for a framework for creating REST API or HTTP request. Then second is the Socket.io. So simply this is the one that we will allow Node.js to have the capability of real-time applications. Then next is the type/socket.io, which holds the data types or the types under socket.io. So I will discuss this thoroughly later in our sample applications. The next is for our front end. So our setup for Angular is basically, so for all the familiar in Angular, scaffolding Angular project is ng-new, then the project name itself. So if you have an Angular project already, a scaffold Angular project already, so you don't have to do it and skip this part, then there's just one package needed for us to enable socket.io in our Angular, and that is socket.io-client. And to install this library is we will just use the command npm install socket.io-client-c. So what we really need here is just to generate a service that we will start the socket IO connections. So, for example, we have already created our backend and it is deployed for a specific URL of the server. So we will just connect our Angular application to our URL of the backend. Basically, we will just create a function inside the service of Angular. Then we will place it as a parameter in the IO, and we will assign it in this the socket to be used outside our components that needs the connection. So next is emitting event to the server. So emitting event means that we are executing or we are sending the server a specific command or execution. We are using the emit function here, and the two parameters is simply the first one is the key that will allow Node.js to identify what will it execute or what will it send back to our front end application. So the first parameter is this one. This is the key. Then the second The second parameter is the data that we need to our backend to process. So basically, this is like a post body for our HTTP request. Then next is how to listen on the push notifications that is coming back, or that is Node.js sending back to our application, front-end application. So it's simply by using the .on function of our socket.io library. Then does now Node.js will also send a specific key that will allow the front-end application to identify what particular thing the front end needs to do in our client side application. So the first one is the key itself, the broadcast. So the broadcast is the first key. Then the second part is the return data. So this is like the response body of our HTTP request. So we can compare this as the response body. So inside this data, the parentheses, the data in with the lambda function, then this is the response body that the client application can consume. So basically, that's it. So cool. Uh, we can now proceed to create our simple application using socket.io. So I will share my example code for Angular and Node.js. Okay, so now we will first set up our Node.js application. So in this part, I've already initialized my Node.js. So I've already commanded the npm init-y. So basically, what will it do is it will just generate the package.json. So this is the package.json of our Node.js app. So we are making our root folder as a Node.js project. Then next, after that is we will just install our dependencies that we need that I have discussed a while ago. So the first dependency that we need here is the uh, Express. So to install that is we just need to install Express, then HTTP socket.io, and at type slash socket.io. Then let's type save. So if we enter this command, is we will add this will add a node modules project that will hold our npm libraries, and it will list down all in our package.json. So it has the same concept with Angular. So I will just zoom all my codes because I'm sure that this is small in our screen. So here we can see that I've already installed my dependencies in our project. So next, I can now use this on our project to create to write our code. So in our dependencies, we have the Express, HTTP, socket.io, and at type socket.io. So our next step is to create a folder named source, and let's create an index.js file inside. So here is basically we will just import our dependencies that we need. So let's try cons app, then require. First thing we need is the express, and the HTTP. So we will use this HTTP just to create the app. Then next is the IO. So we will need this is where we will use the IO or the socket.io dependency. So require socket.io. So we will use our HTTP library. Then we can also configure our HTTP security configurations here. So for example, we want the cores. So what are the only URLs are allowed to access the backend? So we can already define this under the socket.io. For example, the origins allowed is so for in this part we'll just allow the localhost for 200. So this will be the default link for deployed Angular locally. Next, so we will just let our HTTP listen to a specific port. So let's just use the 3000 port. So let's just console log if it's successful. So listen. So now we have created the basic HTTP server for our Node.js. So our goal here is to create a simple real-time application that it will just send a broadcast message to all connected users. So the first thing we need to do is we need to check if some users are connected to our application. So the key for that one is connection. Then so here in this part, the socket is the socket here, the socket that is laid that is available here as a parameter serves as our access to all the functions that we can listen to the front end commands or execution of actions or events. At the same time, um, it this will also allow us to accept keys. So for example, for this one, we'll just first code the disconnect part. So if the user disconnected, so if user is disconnected or one client app is disconnected, so this will be fired in our client. So next is technically the one that will receive message sent. So let's just create another listener or on. So let's use the send message. So message. So this message parameter is simply the message that will be sent by the front end. So next is we want this message to be broadcasted to all connected users. So we will use the io.emit, then it will contain another key that the front end will determine. So we will just send the message. So this code is just a shortcut for message. So we will just send a JSON. We will just send a JSON object on our front end application. So basically, this is it. This is how we create a simple broadcast message using socket.io in Node.js. So the next thing we need to do is now set up our Angular application. So we can run this one. Sorry, not yet. So in this part, we'll just add a script. So let's try start. let's just install. I forgot to install. Let's install NodeMon so we can restart our application by not ending our server. So this is an additional dependency that we can add to run our application. So, but you can also use node command to start, but it's kind of complicated because every time we have changes in our application, we need to close our server in order for our changes to be applied. So we will just install NodeMon for a while. So while we're waiting for the NodeMon to be installed, so let's just type this one, NodeMon. So we want to start our root file. So the listen command is located on index. So simply we'll just create source index.js. So just a recap for our code. So we just created a simple broadcast message. So this is just one uh, event, one listener. So our listener is the send message. So disconnect, actually two listeners disconnect and send message. So our node one is now installed. So let's try running. So let's just resize this one. So let's run the npm run start command. So now we are attempting to run our Node.js backend application. So we can see that it's trying to start our app. Now we are successfully running our Node.js backend application. Then we will proceed to our Angular app. So let's share my other screen. Okay, there. So in this part, actually, I've also created or scaffold my Angular project. So because this will take a while in our demo, so we can see that we have an scaffold Angular project. Then I've also installed the socket.io dash client. So we can see here in the package.json that it is currently on version 3.1.2. So our this is now installed in our package.json. So technically, we can now use it on our Angular application. So this one, I'm also running our Angular app. So I will show you that later. So for this one, I will just create a folder that will house the socket.io service. So let's just create a folder. It's called service. So this is just for demonstration purposes. Then let's generate a sample service named socket.io. So let's wait for our service. So now we have created a sample service. Then this is where we will create our code for setting up our socket connection. So in this part is we'll just import our IO extension. So from socket.io-client. Now we will use this IO to set up our socket connection. So simply set up connection. So just add here an example variable. So this dot socket equals IO. So in this part, this is the backend URL. So this is just for demo purposes, but for reusing our URL, we can use this. We can place this URL in our config, or what we call the environment .ts file that is located in our assets folder, or environments rather folder. So, but in this part, I will just hard code our backend URL. So our backend URL is basically that that we have created earlier, we have deployed earlier in our HTTP create server, which is HTTP localhost 3000. Then the next part is we will create a sample function here that will emit a message. So this that socket dot emit. So in this part, this is the emit function that will allow us to communicate with our backend. So basically, this is just like an HTTP request. Instead, we are not using an HTTP request, but a third-party library, which is socket.io. So the thing is, we're going to use the send message request, or fee rather. Then the message. So we will just have a message parameter that will be sent to our backend application. Next, let's just save this one. So next thing is we're just going to use this in our app component. So let's just delete this one. So I'll just create a very simple, so I will not style this anymore. So let's just create something here, a simple list that will display all the broadcasted message. So in this part, I will just create a sample array. So this will house all the broadcasted messages in our server. So I will just inject socket.io service. Then we will send an example message. So in this part, we will call the send message. Then we have a parameter for this one. So you can see here in our definition that, sorry, the socket.io that let's use the access socket.io service that send message. So I'll just hard code a sample message. So this is a sample message. So in this part, we are now listening. Rather, we are now sending a sample message to our back end. So the next thing is we should listen to our messages in our client app. So for example, listen to this. So this dot. So in this part, we will access the socket dot on. So as we remember in our backend a while ago, we have used the receive message key, receive the message being sent by our backend. So we will just push this one in our messages array. So we will just list down here let message of messages, and we will just display this one. So basically, that's it. So let's just have a recap of our code. So I've just simply created a simple socket IO service that will set up our connection or connect our front-end application in our backend application. So by just putting our backend URL, and I've just assigned this into a socket variable to the access outside this service. Then the send message that will emit to the backend, and it will send a key with the request body, just like the HTTP request for processing of data. Then in our app component.ts, we're just calling the send message to pass a message. Then at the same time, to receive all the broadcasted message, we are just listening on the receive message key. So now let's try. There. So in this part, I'll stop. So I'll just show you the. Sorry about the interpolation. So I will share my uh, browser to check the code or the result of our created application. So I'll share my Chrome. So let's visit our application. So I forgot something that will trigger the message. So let's just add a button. So I will code at the back. So I will just add a button that will trigger the send message. So there. So let's check our console log. Okay. So we have a problem here for the emit of undefined. So it's just a wrong spelling. So we forgot to call the setup socket connection. So we need to call that. So I will show you the changes of the code for a while. So I will just call the setup socket connection. There. So something's not working again. So there, now it's working. We are now pushing our application, our data rather. So this is a sample message is coming from our socket IO. So this is basically coming from the backend with notifications. So in this part, if we have several connected clients, so the page will also be refreshed and the list is also refreshed. So for the changes of the code, I will just let you. So just forgot a single line of code a while ago. So I will also share my screen. So first, I will let you show the front end changes. Uh, so there. So what I just forgot a while ago is to call the setup connection in our application. So this one, so we need to call the setup our application that we have created a while ago in our socket io.service. So basically that's it. Then in our backend, so basically there's not much changes. It's just the emit. So I've just committed a wrong spelling, but we can see here that a while ago we are successfully connecting to our backend. So if we refresh the page, so the user is disconnected. So we can see that it's already logging that the user is disconnected. So basically, that's how we create the socket IO dot on. So I will just show you another simple application that is a simple basic chat application that I have created. And you can also clone that repository in my GitHub that I have mentioned a while ago. So now, just for a while, I will open the project. So the project is Angular Socket-IO. So if you have, I will provide this link from later on to be a reference in creating a simple chat application. So I will share first the front end. So this is the front end app. This will take time to run. So I will first discuss the code. Then, okay. So for this one, this is a basic chat application. So I have created several events that will allow us to receive messages, check all the online users in our application at the same time have a peer-to-peer messages. So uh, in this part, I've just created uh, several listeners or events rather. So for this one, let me discuss this one by one. So this receive messages both is for the data sender and the data receiver. So I am isolating who is the sender and who is the receiver. So I will know who will only receive the broadcast. Then the receive message sender part is, for example, it you will redirect to the user again, or you will click a particular user and you have history of messages. So this is the one will trigger to retrieve all the messages or for that particular user. Then the send user list is just to retrieve all the users that are available in our application. So if another user is recently online, so we will show that it will show the list will be automatically updated in our front end. So basically that's the one getting all the list. So we have just um, I forgot to mention that I've connected this to Auth0. So Auth0 provides automatic or a simple setup for us uh, to maintain the roles and the users and the information. And my strategy here is to use the username as the key, or rather the ID of the user as the key to identify which is the sender and which is the receiver. So in this part, in our SOT IO service, so same method a while ago that I have created. So I've just um, defined our local URL, localhost backend URL, which is localhost colon 3000. Then my main actions here are send message. So basically, this is sending a message. Then I've also created the sender receiver. I have also sent the sender receiver to be identified by the node who is the sender and who is the receiver. Then the get messages is simply getting all the message uh, by sending that to our backend that we need to get the messages for a specific sender and receiver. Then the get user list is the same, um, that we will need to get all the users, available users in our application. And logout, simply it will allow us to send the server to log and destroy the token in our application. So let's just wait for our application to run. I will also run my backend. So next. So while waiting for our front end to run, we will check our back end. So I will share my back end screen. So application window. So this is my back end. So actually, I will discuss this also in simpler terms. So for our back end is we have just also defined the keys that we need, or the front end needs, in order for a front end to know what are the things that uh, it needs to do. So if this is the get messages, so the get messages simply um, allows the back end to get all the messages for a specific sender and receiver. So this is just my own logic. So this can be a different logic in our database. So I'm just using here a sample data store. So this is just a mock database. So my logic is simply here. But if you are using ORM, type ORM, or any framework in Node.js like loopback, so it may be a different code inside. So in the IO emit, so the receive message sender, so this will be the key that will be identified by our front end application. Then another listener is the send message. So this send message is the one being sent by the front end that will be identified in the node that a particular or specific user is sending a message to a specific receiver or user. So this is I will not I will not discuss the code here specifically because this is my own logic on how the data store works. So the receive message both is the emit function that will the front end receive. So I'm just sending the sender, the receiver, and the message of the sender to the receiver. Then the get user list is, as I have mentioned a while ago, it will send all the available or online users in our application. So we'll just wait around a minute to run our front end. So Angular will just compile in a while. Yes. Um, while waiting, I think I can also answer some of the questions that are um, available in the comments. So yeah, for Sir Pojong, is it a WebSocket? Yes, it is a WebSocket. So it's an example. So for other technologies like .NET or other languages, Socket.io is like Signal R. So it's basically also a WebSocket that is being used by Node.js. So that's WebSocket example. So what is the default port of IO for Sir Pojong again? It's for Node.js. So what we are using for the server of Node.js, that's also the port of socket.io. So other questions is from Mappy. Looks great to use to notify users when queue jobs are completed. Yes, that's also one of the use of socket.io. It's very good for queue jobs that are uh, for for queuing. So yeah, actually I forgot to mention that. So it's really a good use for queuing also. So but for lessons, remember that Socket.io is really good. Real-time applications are really good, but it's not recommended to use real-time applications on all of your features because we we need to evaluate some things that is it really needed for this feature for our real-time applications because sometimes we might overuse it and might affect the performance of our application. So we need to think twice if we really need our a real-time application, a real-time feature in our application. So, can you also use Socket.io to create a P2P chat app? Yes, a peer-to-peer. So this is the example I will show you, Sir Jerwin. So, basically there are different strategies. So, my first example is just a broadcast. So it's not peer-to-peer. It will just basically send the updates to all the users. But this one, I'm using Auth0 information. So I've created a login. So I will show you if my application already started. So this is a sample of peer-to-peer. So I'm using the ID as to isolate all the messages in our application for a specific sender and receiver. So at the same time, it can also be used for group chat messages. So it's another logic. So you will collect all the users uh, that is allowed to receive the broadcasted message. So just a specific array of users. So okay, now we have we have compiled successfully our Angular application. So I will show you my browser. Sorry about that. My browser hung for a while. So I will show you my browser. So for this one, this is an example peer-to-peer. So I've just used the Auth0 authentication. So I will log in. Sorry, I should share my full screen for this one because I will open two browsers. So we can see here. So for this one, let's open another one. So apologies for my laptop. It's running several applications, so it might hang for a while. So this is login as my email, first email. So this one, I will log this in as my second email. So this is another user. So we can see here that we have already have a peer-to-peer application. So I will show you two users that will have a peer-to-peer chat. So this one is a self-chat. So if you're doing this in Messenger, so this is possible. So I'm chatting with my own. So hello self. I will send this one. So we can see here that it fired two messages because I've sent my message, then I've also received. So just ignore. It should be the first one, but it's just for the UI, so we need a logic for that. So this is the self send. So I've received and sent a message for myself. So this one, I've already tested the data for this. So I've retrieved the data, the peer-to-peer messages for my other. So if we can see here, this is for the self of CGB 13, and this is our chat for the two users. So here, if I've created a sample message, so CG2, we can see that we have sent a message here that, and in our second user, we can see that it is also updating. So it's just like a simple peer-to-peer application. So if we send another message from TGV to my other email, so we can see that it's also receiving the message. So this is the peer sample peer-to-peer messages for Socket.io. So peer-to-peer is possible depending on the logic that you are using or the tools that you are using, like database. So basically, that's it on how to create on Socket.io. If you want to know more about my code, so I will share in PWA my uh, PowerPoint presentation. So my GitHub is included there. I will also include the name of the project. So I have already pushed my code for Angular and Node.js to uh, for you to as a reference on creating sample peer-to-peer using Node.js and Socket.io. So that's all for my talk, and thank you. I hope you learned more. I hope you learned a lot from Angular and Node.js.
Okay, so we do have some questions for you, Seiji, coming from
Yep.
those who registered.
Yeah.
So first is, okay, here's the first one from Nelson Ababol Jr. What are the efficient way to handle promises and callbacks?
Promises and callbacks. Is this for Node.js? I think this is for Node.js itself. So promises are really for promises. If we want to handle this in an efficient way, I think it's just like an observable. So um, we should I think, for example, if you know the concept of smart and dumb components, so first is we need to group these promises in a simple in one component. So that's the smart one. So this is are the just the components that we need to communicate. So in order for us to simply to have a simpler way to close our promises, so it's just located in one location. So that's my one of the efficient way for handling promises and callbacks.
Okay, so we have another question. This is a question for both the speakers. Um, but I will ask you first. Where is it? Okay, here it is. What are the things an Angular dev should know besides the basic Angular modules like routing, form services, etc.?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a good question. Thank you, Jason, for that. So yeah, actually, what you have mentioned is These are the most important things to know: Angular modules, routing, forms, and services. Other things is components. So basically, in my personal experience, many developers or starting developers for Angular are really confused. What is the difference between modules and components? So we really need to learn what is the difference for that one. So that's is the pillar of Angular. Next is Angular is considered MVW. So if you haven't heard what is MVW, so if you're familiar, if in MVC it's model view controller, in MVW it's model view whatever. So what's the meaning of that? It means that many companies have their own preference in terms of architecture or project structure of Angular. First is so the first question here is what are the things we really need to follow in project structure or the folder structure? On my own opinion, actually, it's really a debate in Angular. What is the project the standard project folder? But if you will read several articles, you can see some of the basic structures or basic folder structures. So this is what we call the three pillars or the three folders. So you should follow this because this is like the basic or the most used standards in Angular. So this is the core, module, and shared pillars of Angular. So this is the first three folders. Next is actually this I don't consider this basic, but it's just a preparation for industry because this is mostly required for Angular development, such that we know that companies are providing applications that are really complex, so enterprise applications. So now, in my experience, they require state management. It's really good to have a knowledge in state management, especially in applying for Angular. Then next, another thing is if uh, the another thing for Angular development is the architecture itself, the smart and dumb components. So if you want to learn Angular deeply. So smart and dumb components is a good practice. So this is really widely practiced architecture because it will allow our Angular code to be clean. Because if we are working on component frameworks like React, Angular, and we are just coding it in just no standards, and our code is like spaghetti, so it's really hard to maintain. So we need to have a standard which is the smart and dumb components. So yeah, you can read more on that. So yeah.
Okay. So, oh wait. Okay. Um, do you have any other questions in the comments? Can you check? Ano?
Wait, I'm checking.
Someone
So far
hijacked
wala.
my TV.
Wala naman.
Okay. Wait. Someone tried to play YouTube on my TV. Wait. Anyway, yeah. So last words. Last words. Do you have any what do you call this? Tips or advice to aspiring Angular developers?
Yes. For the aspiring developers for Angular, actually, Angular has a really high learning curve. So there there are several things happening in Angular, and there's several things you need to learn in Angular, such as modules, components, routings, forms. So it has its own libraries or dependencies. So my first tip there is to learn the basics itself. So what is the use of services? What are the use of modules? Then what's the use of components? Then deeply, if you know the basics now, so learn other features like the HTTP request. So how to call HTTP request in our Angular using RxJS and other operators. Then next is um, by deeply diving into um, other parts of Angular like directives, pipes, what are the usage, then simply the architecture, the standards. So that's the main purpose. That's uh, the main flow of our learning in Angular. So we should take it slowly because um, if you are a developer who is not familiar in component programming or JavaScript frameworks that are now into component based. So it will really introduce you some new new um, new features or new jargons uh, in our application. So like observables. So on my first learning what in Angular, I'm really confused what is observable. So we really need to learn what is that. So and also in my experience on my mentees, so this is their problem. How to actually it's like a promise. Observable is like a promise, but uh, it is different in a way that observables in the names itself it subscribes and listens to the HTTP request continuously. So this is also a main problem for Angular developers that they are forgetting to manage observables in a right way. So it really affects the performance. Then, if you know already the basics of Angular, so also think of its performance. There are uh, there are chances that your work code might be working, but you are not handling all the components uh, in in efficiently. So it will really affect your performance of your Angular application. So um, more components means more loading in our client browser. So we need to know all the strategies like lazy loading. So that's the basic flow of Angular learning there.
I
Okay.
just have a few comments on the RxJS part. I do agree with everything you say, Seiji.
Yeah.
Just as an FYI, we've been discussing lately some GDEs around the needing or the need of knowing RxJS for Angular, right? While RxJS is incorporated in a lot of parts of Angular, you actually can write an application without RxJS, right?
Mm.
So if your team
Yeah.
doesn't feel comfortable using RxJS, feel free to use it, right? I don't want you to feel like you cannot learn Angular if you don't know RxJS or because some teams just don't have the time to learn RxJS, and sometimes they just fall back into using promises or using async await and things like that. Of course, the ideal scenario will be 100% for you to learn RxJS, but just be aware of is not needed, right? You can still be an Angular developer
Yep.
without knowing RxJS.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, the Pato is correct for that because actually RxJS is a third party from Microsoft. So yeah, it's really a headache. It has different operators. So if you don't want to use that, you're also free. There.
But it's super cool though, so I
Yeah,
100% recommend you to use it though. I
yeah,
think
it's
it's really,
cool.
really,
It
really
has
nice.
really many functions, right, Pato? But if for a starter learners, it's really confusing. Especially it really offers so much operators or other functions in Angular.
Okay. So yeah, since Pato is already here as well in the I think we introduce everyone so that our live stream audiences know. So we have from Angular Philippines, Seiji Villafranca. Um, we just had his talk earlier. We also have Glenn Olaso, also from Angular Philippines. Hi, Glenn.
Hi, Glenn.
And
Hi, hello.
It's me.
Hello.
yeah,
Good evening.
hello. Okay. We
Thank you
also
for
have
inviting.
yeah, we also have one our speaker, next speaker, Pato. Hello, sir. Hello. Um, we also have from PWA Pilipinas side, we have Maklem Adan. Hi, Lem. He's
Hello.
also Lem. And we also have Michael Lance, which is on the background. And also me, I'm Andresito de Guzman from PWA Pilipinas as well. So, yeah, before we end Seiji's talk, I guess let's have a picture if
Yeah,
that's okay.
sure.
Sure. So that we have a picture with the communities and with Pato. Can you do it, Lem?
Oh, wait.
Okay. If you can open your camera, Glenn. Okay, it's okay. He has problems with camera. Just to have it in the frame.
Oh, wait. Wait lang ah.
Okay. Give us the cue.
Sure, wait.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Or we can just smile like take a screenshot later. Okay. I think that would be better.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Okay, ready.
Okay.
1, 2. Hmm.
Nice.
Okay.
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 Yeah.
Once again, thank you, Seiji, for sharing your knowledge to the Angular community here and as well to the PWA Philippines community. Thank you. So you may stay if you want
Yeah.
to
Yeah, sure.
watch
Thank you
other
for having
stuff.
me. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yay. Okay. So, um, yeah. Let's. I'm now formally introducing our next speaker. Okay. Where is it? Okay. Here it is. Okay. So our next speaker for this session is a Google developer expert on Angular and web technologies. Our speaker is also a Women Techmaker Ambassador, an Auth0 ambassador, just like Seiji. Um, Also a media developer expert at Cloudinary, a Springboard mentor, and a Platzi master coach. Let's all welcome Patricio Pato Vargas. Good day, buenos dias.
Buenos dias. So it's just funny that you say buenos dias, and because I have a few friends from the Philippines. I live in the U.S., um, and it caught my attention that you guys have Hispanic last
Yeah,
names, right,
yeah.
and names. And I asked him, hey, how did that happen? And he explained me, about the Spanish and all that. And I thought it was like super interesting. For example, I'm Mexican myself, right? And I have a few friends in Mexico that they go by Andresito as well,
Oh,
right? And then I'm seeing some people in our audience, for example, that their name is Sebastian
yeah.
Martinez,
Mm-mm.
and I'm like, oh my god,
Yeah.
it's like I think it's just like super cool.
Yeah, the thing is that we've been colonized for almost 300 years. So the Spanish culture is really deeply incorporated to the Filipino culture. So yeah, we have last names that are yeah, but we aren't really good in Spanish anymore. So
Ah,
yeah, just a
yeah,
little
I
bit.
think it's so cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
So
Pojong says he's from Costa Rica. Oh, that's awesome.
Yes.
oh wow, nice.
Super cool. Awesome. So is it my turn to present?
Sure.
Cool. So hopefully everything runs smoothly because right before the talk,
Yeah.
my Node.js decided to crash. I don't know why, but I actually had to reinstall Node.js in my computer right before the talk. So fingers crossed that everything works. So I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, perfect. Can everyone see my screen right now?
Yes, you can see it.
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome, perfect. So thanks everyone for coming to this talk today. Today I'm gonna be talking about the power couple that is Angular and Tailwind CSS. Like Andresito was saying, I'm a Google Woman Tech Maker, Stack Overflow contributor, media developer expert, Auth Zero ambassador, Trillo champ, Springboard mentor, and that's something that I do, for the community. But my actual role is senior developer advocate for a company called One Signal. So if you're interested on push notifications, SMS messages, emails, and all that kind of stuff, we are your guys. So you can really easily incorporate us into your iOS app, Flutter, Angular, React, whatever. We got you. But we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about Tailwind and Angular CSS. So the first question that you may have is, what is Tailwind CSS? Tailwind CSS is a utility-first CSS framework packed with classes like Flex, PT4, Text Center, Rotate 90 that can be composed to build any design directly into your markup. A few advantages of Tailwind CSS are the following. Whenever you're writing Tailwind CSS, you don't have to focus your energy into writing CSS, right? So you can focus more time into your business logic, right? So that's an advantage. The CSS classes are already made for you, so all you have to do is combine them, right? So whenever you're developing an application, you may notice, you go to CSS and create a class and put the properties, and then you integrate them into your HTML. Well, that's awesome. That's the normal workflow. For Tailwind CSS usage, you're skipping that process of creating the CSS. You literally just use the classes that are already made for you. And then you add those predefined classes into your HTML. The same way you add any CSS class, you add it to your HTML the same way. So that's not going to change, right? Is really light in production. And I want to emphasize that the production part, because whenever you're in dev mode, it's actually really heavy. And I'm going to show you how to take it from being really heavy to put Tailwind CSS on a diet to make it like super light. It's mobile first, meaning you don't really have to worry about writing media queries, right? Honestly, I'm not a fan of media queries. I don't like them. I use them because I have to. I need to make my applications responsive. I just don't like the syntax, but that's just me, right? And that's when Tailwind CSS comes like really handy to me, because I don't really have to worry about that. All I have to do is adapt my code to bigger screens because it's already mobile friendly, right? And all I have to do is just add a predefined class that they already wrote for us in order to make my code responsive, right? But I don't have to write the media queries, which is awesome. The other cool thing about Tailwind CSS is that it's extendable and customizable, right? You can customize it and in a really easy way through the configurations. That way you can personalize your Tailwind configurations and not having to use the default values that Tailwind CSS comes with. So I think that's really cool because it's really useful for creating design systems. You can use it the old school way, and I'm gonna tell you what the old school way is later in the talk, so just be patient with that. And the VS Code extension from Tailwind CSS is super handy because it's gonna increase your developer experience. Now, this is all amazing, cool. Tailwind CSS sounds pretty neat, but let's be realistic, right? I'm the kind of guy that whenever I talk about certain product, I like telling people what are the disadvantages as well, right? Because I don't want you to just go straight and use a tool I'm recommending and everything is perfect. That is not true, right? So Tailwind has a few disadvantages. For example, the first one is that you're not going to write that much CSS, right? And you might be wondering, well, how can that be a problem? The problem is the following. If you're not really good at CSS, you're going to encounter the problem of not practicing CSS, right? The second one is if you need to debug the classes for something not working perfectly in your application, you're gonna have to take an extra step to debug and figure out what the class is actually, the predefined class from Tailwind is actually doing for you, right? Because you didn't write it, so you need to figure out what's going on. And the other problem that I see is that it can get really ugly in your HTML, but I'm gonna show you one of the best practices with Tailwind CSS to make it more clean whenever you're using it in your HTML. So write that down. And another disadvantage that I see, in my personal opinion, that if you don't follow the best practice on purging your CSS, your Angular application is going to be really heavy. So like I was telling you guys before, that's just a disadvantage. And I'm going to show you how to put it on a diet. We're going to learn that here in this talk. So whenever you're working with Tailwind CSS, there's essentially two ways of doing it depending on what Angular version you're working with, right? If you're working with an Angular version below 11.2.0, you may want to use this schematic right here. And we're going to talk about it as well in this talk. And if you're using a greater version than 11.2, then Angular now supports natively Tailwind CSS. So let's talk about this schematic, right? Remember, if you're using a version of Angular less than 11.2, this is the way I suggest you to go by adding Tailwind into your Angular app. I put these two guys right here because I think they're amazing, because they are some of the guys who decided to come up with this schematic. They're some of the supporters as well. So kudos to them. This is Chan and this is Vimen. Thank you so much, guys, if you guys are watching. So all you have to do with an schematic, which in this case is the ng-need Tailwind, is to literally run this in your command line inside of your Angular app. And the schematic is going to do a lot of the things in the background for you. And let's see what it's going to be doing for us. So you enter the command, and then it's going to ask you if you want to add dark mode. You select class, as you can see, right? And then if you want to add the directives, you click yes. And it's going to ask you if you want to enable some plugins, which in this case, I added the forms and the typography plugin, right? That sounds really cool. As you can see, it's super easy to use this schematic because it does a lot of the things for you in the background. But also, besides installing the plugins and installing Tailwind and all that kind of stuff, it does a little bit more. For example, if you go to your index HTML file, if you remember going back into us running the schematic, we decided to add the dark mode, right? And what happens is that the schematic goes into your index.html file, and in the body, it adds this class right here. So that is done for us. The other thing that is done for us is it goes to the style CSS file, right? And it adds the imports from Tailwind for us to be able to use now Tailwind into our application. So that sounds really cool. But what happens with Tailwind in Angular that, is a greater version of 11.2? Thankfully, well, Angular and Tailwind are getting married. So guys, this is their wedding. So if you're here, you're super lucky to get an invite. Only the coolest people in the world, which are like PW Philippines, are able to make it to the wedding today. So thanks for coming. And just as an FYI, you're still able to use the schematic with the 11.2 version. But in this case, it's not necessary. Why? Because now Angular supports Tailwind natively, right? So now I'm going to show you how to actually, use Tailwind with Angular. So let's get our hands dirty. So I'm going to go over here. And as you can see, I have this super, super complex application with only one component. I'm kidding. It's super simple. All I have, as you can see, is just the default component. I didn't want to add more things and make it more complex because that's not the purpose of this talk. So as you can see, I have a div, I have a paragraph, I have a button, I have 2 images, and I already have some classes right here that I'm going to be touching in a few seconds, right? So the first thing that I have to do is install Tailwind CSS. So but to do that, I go to npm install -d Tailwind CSS. Then I'm going to click enter. Let's just give it a few seconds for Tailwind to install. Beautiful. Now the next step that I have to do is for me to create a Tailwind configuration file. And the way we do that is really easy. You just have to make sure that you're in the root folder, right? So you're gonna click in the root folder and you're gonna type Tailwind, right? config.js. And I have this new file right here. And I'm gonna copy paste a configuration that I have. Just as an FYI, this configuration is not something that I came up with. It's something that I literally found in the documents, right? So you can go to the documents from Tailwind and find this configuration, right? Now, as you can see, I have the dark mode right here, right? Which is something that the schematic was doing for me. But in this case, I have to do it manually. And by manually, it means just me adding that property, right? So it's nothing crazy that I'm doing in the background. Obviously, you can remove this if you want. You don't have to do it. I'm just showing you just for learning purposes. And another part that we touch related with the schematic and Tailwind as well is the plugins, right? So I have these plugins right here, right? The schematic installs these plugins for me in the background, right? So since I'm not using the schematic, I have to do it myself. So it's really simple to do that. All you have to do is use them, and you are gonna enter this command. So as you can see, it says npm I, which means install Tailwind CSS typography, which is this one right here. And let's just give it a few minutes. I'm kidding, a few seconds to install. Dun, 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 dun. Perfect. Now, what am I missing? I'm missing the other plugin, which is the Forms one, right? So I'm gonna go over here and install it as well. Should be pretty quick. Great, beautiful. Now, what's next? Remember that our schematic was adding things to our CSS. Well, we have to do the same, right? In order for us to import the classes. So I'm gonna go over here to the styles.css. I'm gonna import that. Boom, I'm gonna save it. Right now, what I need to do is actually run my Tailwind Angular app just to make sure that everything is working. So let's cross our fingers, hoping that nothing broke. Let's just give it a few seconds. There you go. It's generating the bundle. This part right here like always makes me like so nervous because it kind of like always like stocks. I'm like all the time like wondering, oh my god, is this gonna work or not? And then it just randomly starts moving and then like boom, works, right? So as you can see, this application is actually like super heavy. It's like 8.69 megabytes. That's like massive. And if we take a look a little bit closer to see who is the person responsible of making my application heavy, who do you think it is? Do you think it's Angular or do you think it's Tailwind? Well, obviously it's Tailwind, and check how heavy it is. Oh, that's no bueno, no bueno. But I'm gonna show you how to put Tailwind CSS on a diet because Tailwind wants to look beautiful for the wedding, right? So we're gonna go over here. And you know, this is before I apply Tailwind CSS. And if I refresh my page, boom, it looks a little bit better, right? No problem. Some Tailwind CSS properties are already applied because I already wrote them for you. And let's take a look to that. So if you go over here, I have this class already in my Angular image, which is this one right here. And it says W44 and H44. What do you think that means? Well, I'm going to tell you super simple. The W stands for width, and the H stands for height, and the 44 stands for the actual number, right? So it's 44 height. Then another classes that I have over here are these ones. It says text center, text green, and I'm applying the green color, and font bold. Remember that these classes right here that you're seeing right here and these ones right here, they are already pre-made for me thanks to Tailwind CSS. They just decided to take their time and create this awesome open source project for us to have a better developer experience. So I don't really have to worry about writing the CSS. Like I was telling you, all I have to worry is about combining the classes that they already made for me, which is amazing. So the only problem is that, as you can see, I already have 1, 2, 3 classes. Not bad, but essentially I can have way many more classes, right? And this can make my my Angular application look really ugly on the HTML file. So there's actually a solution for that. So if I go over here to my, check this out. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna split the page. So as you can see, I have this class that I actually created. I did create this one myself, but I'm using this keyword from Tailwind that is apply. Apply allows you to indeed apply Tailwind CSS classes into your CSS, right? So now you can actually use your classes, your own classes, the one that you created in the old-fashioned, like I was telling you guys before. All you have to do is import it into your HTML, and now it's gonna look cleaner. So I did the same with the button, right? As you can see, my button is red, right? And I created this btn class, which stands for button, and I could have named it however I want, no problem. And I added the Tailwind CSS classes over here, right? And we can do the same with this one right here. Let's just like remove this bad boy, boom, and we're just gonna name it like text or something like that. Actually, I'm not gonna name it text because there might be something that is already called like that. So I'm just gonna put a better name. So before I do that, right, I'm gonna save it. And as you can see, now this styling it's gone. It's not green anymore, right? Why? Because sure, I added the apply here, right? And I added my Tailwind CSS classes, but I didn't add my new class over here. So now all I have to do is just add it to my HTML. Then we go over here, boom, voila, we have it again. But once again, this wedding invite doesn't look really cute, so why don't we spice it up, give it a little bit of formatting, and I'm gonna show you how to use Tailwind CSS and their documentation, right? So what I wanna do is I want to put the Angular logo on the left and the Tailwind logo on the right. So the way I would do it, if I'm writing my own CSS, I will use Flex, because Flex by default is gonna put my elements in a horizontal way. So if we go to the Tailwind documentation, we're just gonna enter here and we're gonna type Flex. Let's see if that exists. So it does, as you can see, it says right here, and it gives you other Flex properties. So I'm just gonna click on the first one. And it gives you the classes that they already made for us, and it gives you the actual properties that they apply to the CSS classes that they predefine for us, right? So it shows us right here how to use Flex initial. Everything looks good. So it looks like the first thing that I have to do is just to apply the word Flex. So the word Flex is actually the class. So I'm gonna save it and I'm gonna go back. Okay, it's looking better. Now everything is horizontally, but that looks kind of weird, right? When do we try to align them? So how would you do that? As you can see, whenever you're writing CSS and using Flexbox, if I wanted to align the items horizontally, I will probably do like justify items or something like that, right? And then let's see, justify content. Let's see if this is what I'm looking for. Justify center. That could be it. Let's try it out. Right. Let's see. What about items? Let's see. What align items? Okay. This one. Actually, this is the one I need because align items aligns my items vertically. And as you can see, they are not aligned vertically, right? They're already aligned horizontally like this, but now I need them to be like exactly like at the same level. So it looks like items, align items is what I need. So I have item start, item center. Oh, and do you see the auto completion right here is thanks to the VS Code plugin that I have for Tailwind. So kudos to that. Item center, I save it, and let's see. Okay, looks like they are aligned now. Now, as you can see, there's like some weird space right here, and then this is like almost like touching each other. So I want to give it some space, which is funny that I said the word space because something I really like about Tailwind is that it kind of like understands my language. And what do I mean with that is like if I want to align items, well, I type align, right? If I want to give them some spacing, then I'm just gonna type space and then see what they come up with. And for example, right here it says space between. Let's take a look to that. So apparently they do have a predefined class with the word space. As we can see, they have all these classes that they created for us. The interesting part is that it says space y0. What do you think the y means? For me, whenever I'm talking about coordinates, right, we have the x and the y axis. So this is what it means. So in this case, it says give some space between my elements on the y-axis or in a vertical way and give them a space of 0. So essentially, nothing's going to change, right? But as you can see, you can keep increasing the space and give it a little bit more. In this case, I'm just going to use, let's just a space y4, and it tells you what is the actual CSS selector, right? So this can actually help you as well to learn a little bit of CSS, but it can be a little bit confusing. So let's go back to our Angular app and type space y, and then we say that we're adding 4. Save it. Then I go over here and actually wrong. This should be x, because as you can see, nothing changed because I give it space of y, right? And since my items are aligned horizontally, like I'm not seeing the change. So this actually needs to be x. And boom. Oh, you guys saw it on the fly, giving more space. Awesome. So that's really good. It's really good. Everything seems working smoothly. And as you can see, something I like about Tailwind CSS as well is that it gives you an image of what is happening whenever you apply your classes. Like I said, we were giving space between elements, and I applied this one right here. And as you can see, this part right here is the space. So it's like, oh my God, I'm applying the space between elements. I think it's a really good way to represent what's going on. In this one, they're applying y instead of x. And as you can see, the items are in a vertical position or in a flex column direction. And I'm giving the space between them. So really cool, really cool. Now, let's talk about something that is important as well. How about we build our Angular application using Tailwind? So we're going to type ng build -- prod, then we run it, and let's see what happens. And by the way, you can see that this is highlighted in red. This is just purely syntax. It's my linter. It's not an actual error. It's just the linter that I have is not used to seeing this kind of like classes added inside of my CSS with the apply, but it's nothing that is going to break your application, just as an FYI. So let's just give it a few seconds for it to build. Since this is the first time I build it, it's going to take a few seconds. And whoa, what happened? What happened right here? As we can see, my bundle size is 4.99 megabytes, which is still a big no. So once again, the responsible of this is Tailwind CSS, because as we can see, we see that our CSS file is 4.78 megabytes. And obviously the CLI is telling me over here like, hey buddy, this is like too heavy for us. We don't want it. We don't like this. So I'm going to show you how to actually purge your CSS files, right? But the first thing that I want to explain is what is purging. Purging essentially is getting rid of the CSS classes that your application is not using. Tailwind CSS has thousands of predefined CSS classes, right? And since, as you can see, I'm not using all of them, I don't need them, right? I only need the ones I'm actually using. So let's get rid of the things that we don't use. So I'm going to go to my Tailwind CSS, to my tailwind.config.js file. And where is this purge, right? I'm going to enter the following property. And basically I'm telling like enable. And then I'm only going to do this if I'm running in production mode. I'm going to say this, boom, right? And then I'm going to enter my console. And the next step is going to be for me to actually like, run the build again. And for example, right here in my command line, I'm entering the environment variable production. Why? Because I specify production in here. And I'm putting ng build -- prod. And let's wait to see how much is Tailwind CSS where Angular is the weight, right? Let's see how heavy it is now. So we were at 4.99. By accident, I cleared the console to show you the difference, but just keep in mind that we were at 4.99. So let's cross our fingers and boom, we got 224 kilobytes. So it went down so much. As you can see, our CSS file is 4.42 kilobytes now, where before I did the purging, it was 4.72 megabytes. So it went down so much. So that's how easy it is to make your application get a smaller bundle size or get on a diet, right? I wish it was that easy in real life where, I can eat everything I want and then I just do the purging and then nothing happens to my body with all the pizza that I like to eat. So essentially, yeah, this is how easy it is for you to integrate Tailwind CSS into your application. And I have a tutorial for you guys. This tutorial is a written tutorial, right, that you can find in using this link. And if we go over here, this is the tutorial that I have written. Explains a little bit about like Tailwind CSS in general, how does it work, advantages, disadvantages that we were talking about. I show you how to use it with the lower version of the 11.2, right? But obviously, if you already know the advantages and disadvantages because you came to my talk, then you don't really have to worry about this part. All you have to do is scroll to the actual implementation. And if you have a Angular version greater than 11.2, you can skip that as well. You keep scrolling down, and then you're gonna see the installation guide, and then I show you step by step. You see, look where it starts. Starts right here, right? Then I scroll down, and boom, it ends right here. Super tiny. You see, really, really, really tiny. Super, super easy to do. I have the commands that you have to enter right here, and the plugins, like I said, is super tiny. I know maybe during the presentation it looked like I was doing more steps, but it's actually like really, really tiny for you to do, tiny steps. And right here, I'm just like showing you like how to test it, just to make sure that everything is working, right? And right here, I'm showing you how to put Tailwind CSS on a diet. Like I said, I explain in detail what it's doing, and it's super simple. And then I put the comparison, for perfect. Right here, as you can see, it says 4.78 megabytes, and right here it says 4.11 kilobytes. Obviously, it's different than the one I'm getting right here. Why? Because in this application, in this demo application that I did for the tutorial, is a smaller application, meaning that I'm not using as many CSS classes from Tailwind that I'm doing right here. What else I have for you? Oh yes, and here's the code. So screenshot that, do whatever you want with it, and yeah, that's it. That's all I have for you. So bring the question, guys. Come on, ask me questions.
Okay, so there's a question. Does it support Shadow DOM? From
Does it support Shadow DOM? Yes. There's actually people that have used Lit Element with Tailwind CSS. I have used Lit Element actually for a long time. I used Lit Element for like 2 years, but I never incorporated Tailwind CSS. But I know one of my friends has done it. So yeah, it works. And then, does it use Grid? Thanks for asking all the questions, by the way. I appreciate that. And by you saying does it use Grid, I think you mean if they have support for Grid classes, and actually they do. So I'm gonna show you really quick how that looks. So I'm click on share screen one more time, and okay. So if I go over here, I type Grid, just like you said, you thought about Grid. I'm just gonna use Grid. So you go right here, you see all these suggestions. Then I'm just gonna click on the first one, and then it just shows you that the first thing that you have to do is just declare the Grid class, which is like the base class for you to start using Grid, and then you start adding the other Grid properties and classes as you may need.
Okay, so yeah, we have some questions from those who have registered. So these are for our speakers. So I already asked Seiji about this, but here's the question. What are the things an Angular dev should know besides the basic Angular modules like routing form services, etc.? Question is from Jason Conception.
Sure. I mean, I think everything that CG mentioned is I think he is spot on. I think he did perfect on that aspect. I think something purely about Angular itself, I think it was already like described, right, by Seiji. But I think I will try to focus as well on becoming better at TypeScript, right? Because I mean, sure, you can use pure JavaScript with Angular, but you don't really want to do that. I mean, just don't do it, right? And TypeScript is super powerful. Like, it's crazy how people back in the days, they were saying, oh, I don't want to get into Angular because I have to learn TypeScript. I have to learn X, Y, and Z. And now you look at these kittens, what are they doing? Tell me. I want to hear it. They're using TypeScript with React. They're using TypeScript with whatever with Vue and all that, because they saw the value of TypeScript inside of their application, right? So I think TypeScript, it is what it is right now, thanks to the Angular community. So yeah, focus on learning TypeScript. Of course, you don't have to be an expert on TypeScript to learn Angular, but there's a lot of useful things that can help your developer experience whenever you're learning Angular and TypeScript.
Yeah. We have another question. From Nelson Ababol. What tools do you use when planning a project?
What tools do you use when planning a project? Um, that's a really broad question. I'm assuming you're asking for like designing the system. Um,
Maybe.
there's a tool that it's called Mori that we use in the company that I work, and that's a tool that we literally just use to do the workflow and the diagram, right? And that's the only thing that we use to design the applications, right? And we rely that as well on the tickets that we create, and we sort of like kind of link the steps of the workflow to the tickets. That way, I'm like, okay, this step belongs to this ticket, and so on. But something more technical, we don't really do that.
Okay, so Pojong added web components basic standards just to add for interoperability.
I'm
Does
assuming you're
Angular
touching back based on the Shadow DOM question, correct?
Yeah, I think he's referring to what to learn. So it's like Angular elements, web components. Is
mm,
Oh, yeah. Okay, okay. I see what you're saying now. Yeah. Angular elements, I think they're awesome. And FYI, if you're getting into Angular elements, try to take a look to NX, because NX is a tool that allows you to do the monorepo pattern, and NX allows you to create libraries, right, that you can use across your Angular applications in a really easy way. I actually have a few tutorials about that and a few talks, but it's super cool. Thanks for bringing that up, Bojong Martinez.
okay. Seiji, do you have questions for Pato?
Yeah. So Pato, some also has questions from my colleague. So, what's the benefit of Tailwind over Bootstrap?
Okay, great question. Great question. See, I got rid of Bootstrap like 6 years ago. Like, stopped using Bootstrap. Why? Because whenever Angular started becoming like more and more popular, and I wanted to integrate Bootstrap, and I was a fan of Bootstrap, right? They were still using jQuery. I'm like, no, this is like a big no. I don't want to integrate jQuery in the background, because if I wanted to click on a drop down, they were using jQuery, and then of course they got behind and they finally delivered ng Bootstrap that it doesn't use jQuery. But I think it was too late for them to try to get into the CSS framework race. Now, what is the advantage is, in my personal opinion, it feels more natural or more elegant to customize Tailwind CSS for your design system than Bootstrap. I feel like whenever I did it with Bootstrap, it felt like a lot of hacking. And with Tailwind, like I showed you, there was a tailwind.config.js file, and I just felt like it was more natural, right? A cool thing about it as well is that is made for, in my personal opinion, Tailwind is made for design systems. And another cool thing about that is that if you have a designer in your team, right, and they want to know more about Tailwind CSS, they actually can download the Figma files, right? Figma is essentially the Illustrator with all the stylings and all that for the graphic designers to start building their application. They can do that as well. So I think that's another advantage over Bootstrap.
Yeah, thank you, Pato, for the answer.
Anything else, Seiji? Or you're good?
Yeah, I'm all good with the question.
Okay, so let's see. Yeah, Pojong wants to add that jQuery has a problem in security
Yeah,
standards.
100%, 100%. So I mean, I think jQuery it's really cool. Honestly, like jQuery was my first love. I just don't tell anybody, but it was my first love, and I love jQuery. But I'm like, it's time for me to move. It's time for me to
Yeah.
find another love, right? And yes, it has security standards, and the performance of your application is not gonna be great if you overuse it. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And jQuery actually for it's not really recommended using it together with Angular because it's really heavy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and touching base on that as well, like you have no idea how many times I go on Stack Overflow. Well, it doesn't happen that much anymore, but around like Angular 2 and Angular 4 version, whenever they came out a few years back, a lot of people were still using jQuery. I'm like, why? You literally can do the same with Angular than jQuery essentially. Well, at least I mean, there might be a few things that of course are easier to do with jQuery, right? But everything that I've been having to need, I don't need jQuery. I just do it with Angular or CSS because CSS now is like super powerful. Like I'm surprised how far CSS is getting every day. Like you can do so many things. You can even now have a slider without JavaScript. It's crazy, just pure CSS. So
Pato is really correct for that one because yeah, if you're using Angular, it's really not recommended to use jQuery because what jQuery can do, Angular can also do that. All the features.
Okay. So yeah, let's see this. This is from Joshua. He's from Flutter Philippines. So just
awesome.
unmute
Thank you,
to
Joshua.
yeah.
I think it went
He's
good.
also a Go developer expert. Yeah. Okay. So with that, thank you, Pato, for sharing your knowledge to the PW Pilipinas and Angular Philippines community. So hopefully we can have you again next time.
Hey, anytime for
Yeah.
real. Like I was like super excited for this talk because this is actually the first talk that I give for the Asian community, right?
Oh,
Oh.
And for me is right now. Well, the for me was at 8 a.m. and I actually go to bed like really late. I went to bed like almost 5 a.m. last night. Where I'm so excited about this talk. Like I don't care if it's early in the morning. I'm gonna do it, and here I am. So anytime for real, like if you're ever like missing speakers or you're having a hard time finding one, either contact me for me to give you another talk, or I can find someone else as well.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal of this session, is that we wanted to really bring Angular to even more Filipinos for now. Filipinos to be, for them to discover that Angular could be an option. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, you guys, for doing that for real. That's awesome. I think it froze. I think we lost Andresito. Houston calling the spaceship. The spaceship.
we lost our captain.
So I think we lost Lem as well. Okay, Lem is back. Okay, that's perfect. Michael,
Hi.
we never lost you. We never lost you. So what happens? Andresito is gone.
We're having some technical difficulties on the side.
Well, if
Let's wait
you
for
guys
him.
don't have anything else for me, I'm gonna leave you guys. Thank you so much for this time. Like it was amazing. I really appreciate it. Seiji, your talk was super interesting. Thank you for doing that as well.
Yes.
And hopefully we can give a talk together sometime soon.
Yeah, sure, Pato. Looking forward. Thank you for also for the talk that you gave. I really learned so much about that. Looking forward also to read all your contents.
Thank you. Hey, Andresito, you're back.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah, there
worried
you
for a
Yeah.
second. I almost have a heart attack, my friend. I was like, oh my god, we lost Andresito.
I got lost. Anyway, any last words or tips to Angular developers that are just starting to learn more about the framework?
I'm gonna tell you an advice in general. I know there's a huge hype for learning React, for learning all these tools that I know them myself. I work with React very often. I work with Lit Element. I work with other tools, but learn whatever you want to learn. Like, don't wait for someone to tell you what you want to learn. If you want, try different tools. Maybe play with React and play with Angular and make that decision, right? I actually have worked a lot with React in the past year, and I think I still like in Angular a little bit more. But that's just my personal opinion. That's just my personal preference, right? I'm not here to tell you to learn Angular. I'm here to tell you learn whatever you wanna learn.
Okay. So yeah, can we have another picture since oh yeah, I would like you to meet Michael Lance. He's also from PWA Pilipinas. So you say hi,
Hey,
Michael.
Island.
Hello, Pato, Seiji. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, I guess we're going to end the program now. If you do have questions for Seiji, Seiji, can you share your social media accounts?
Yeah,
Maybe you
sure,
can do
Andre.
that.
I'll just send my
Okay.
media accounts to you.
Okay. And we'll share it across our social media networks. How about you, Pato? How can they reach you if they have
so
questions?
I go, like I said, I go by Pato. That's my nickname, and as you can see in the talk, it says Dev Pato. That's how you can find me on Twitter. Feel free to ask me any questions. Just keep in mind that if it's something technical around Angular, I rather you to post a tweet and tag me about it instead of sending me a DM. A DM. I'm sorry. That way, other people can see your question and learn from us.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, once again, thank you to our amazing speakers for tonight, Seiji. Thank you, Patricio Vargas. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, before we end the talk, if you wanted to stay in touch with PWP Pinas, we have our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. We have our own PWA as well. This is built with Angular, so if you want to try a PWA built with Angular, you can check that out. It's app.pwpilipinas.org. This is available on the Play Store with PW Builder. So yeah. Um, with that, thank you everyone. Hope to see you in our next events. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.